This is a story from the village of Otobo. After hearing it, you'll learn to be cautious and take time to love slowly. Before we begin, please don't forget to support this channel by clicking on the subscribe and notification buttons. The village of Otobo was blessed. The land was rich, the rivers never dried up, and the people lived well. Farmers harvested more yams than they could eat. Fishermen pulled in nets heavy with fish, and the women of Otobo, the women, were known far and wide for their beauty. Men traveled from distant villages just to try their luck. Some came looking for wives, others simply to admire. But none had ever seen a woman like Zuri. Zuri was breathtaking. Her skin had a golden glow, smooth as if she had never worked a day under the sun. Her eyes were small and bright, seeming to look right through you, and when she smiled, it was the kind of smile that made men weak in the knees. But Zuri wasn't just pretty, she was kind. She greeted the elders with respect, played with the little children, and never acted like she was better than anyone. That only made people love her more. Her parents, Woke and Ifom, had lived in Otobo all their lives, but no one really knew much about their daughter. She had grown up in a faraway town with her grandmother, an old woman people said had strange knowledge. Some believed she could talk to spirits, that she knew secrets about the world no one else did. Others thought it was just gossip. Either way, Zuri had lived with her grandmother until the woman died. Now she was back home. She was the kind of woman men fought over, the kind who made a man forget his senses. One by one they came for her, the men of Otobo. They were strong, hard-working, full of life, but then, one by one, they began to fall, sick. The first was Obiora, a young man full of confidence, always the loudest at gatherings, always the first to speak when the elders asked for opinions. One evening he was his usual self, laughing, boasting, teasing his friends. By morning he could barely stand. His hands trembled, sweat poured down his face, and his voice, once so loud, was gone. Within days, he was dead. People mourned, but death was not uncommon. It could have been a fever, a curse, or something the gods had written into his fate. A week later, it happened to Eoma. Just like Obiora, he had been fine the night before, talking, eating, laughing. But by morning, he was weak, confused, barely able to move. His family tried everything, herbs, prayers, sacrifices, nothing worked. By the third day, he was gone too. Then then Maker, then Shinedu. The sickness took them all the same way. A strange illness would grip them, rendering them speechless, paralyzed, and within days they would die. Each one bore the same eerie mark, a snake bite near their groin. Fear spread through the village like wildfire. The elders called a meeting. Was it a curse, a punishment from the gods? The healers searched for answers, mixing potions, burning incense, chanting over the sick. Nothing worked. Some villagers whispered about the strange mark found on each of the men, a small wound just above their groins. But no one spoke of it openly. It was too shameful, too strange. The healers dismissed it as just a bite from a dangerous snake. No one connected the men to each other. Even when the men were questioned, they couldn't recall anything. They could not speak. None of them had met Zuri in public. They had gone to her in secret, slipping away at night, meeting her deep in the bush where no one could see. One evening Zuri had gone to the stream to wash her clothes and fetch water. The evening sun hung low in the sky, bathing the village of Otobo in golden light. The air was thick with the scent of fresh earth and ripened fruit. The only sounds were the rustling of leaves. Zuri knelt by the water's edge, her hands moving rhythmically as she scrubbed her clothes against a smooth stone. The cool water lapped at her feet, and she sighed softly, enjoying the moment of solitude. Then she heard footsteps, slow, steady, unhurried. She looked up, and the breath in her chest hitched. A young man stood at the edge of the stream, a wooden bucket in one hand, his gaze scanning the water as if searching for the perfect spot to fill it. He was unlike any man she had ever seen, tall and broad-shouldered, with arms sculpted like a warrior. His chest, half hidden beneath the loose fabric of his tunic, was firm and his stomach taut. But what truly unsettled her were his eyes, a piercing blue, like the sky just before dusk. Eyes so beautiful she had never seen such before. His skin glowed under the setting sun, kissed by its golden rays. His jawline was sharp, his lips full. When he finally looked at her, something inside Zuri shifted. She had seen many handsome men before. She had made them weak with a single glance, watched them trip over themselves just for a chance to be near her. But this was different. She realized she was staring. Quickly she lowered her gaze and focused on wringing the water from her wrapper. But she could feel his presence, sense him moving closer. Her heart pounded, but she steadied herself. When she spoke, her voice was calm, smooth. It was the way it always was. "Good evening," she greeted, offering a warm smile. The man dipped his head slightly in acknowledgement. "Evening." His voice was deep like distant thunder. Zuri waited for more, a compliment, a lingering glance, a sign that he was like the others, but nothing came. Instead, he stepped past her, knelt by the stream, and dipped his bucket into the water. Zuri's fingers tightened around the cloth in her hands. Who was this man? She had expected him to falter, to stumble over his words, to stammer like the others did when they stood this close to her. But he didn't. He simply filled his bucket, stood, and turned to leave. Just like that, it was as if she were no different from any other woman in the village, as if he hadn't even noticed her at all. It wasn't until he had walked a few steps away that he finally spoke again. "My name is Kwame," he said without turning back. Then he was gone. Zuri remained frozen by the stream, the cloth in her hands forgotten. Maybe he was shy, she thought. She rolled the name over in her mind, testing it, tasting it, letting it settle into the corners of her thoughts. She had expected him to be like the others. She had expected him to want her, to chase her, but he hadn't. And that was something new. Zuri thought about Kwame more than she cared to admit. At first, she dismissed it as nothing, a simple curiosity, nothing more. But days turned to weeks, and still, Kwame did not seek her out. While others fumbled over their words when speaking to her, Kwame spoke simply, directly, as if she were no different from any other woman. The more he ignored her, the more she noticed him. She saw the way the other women of the village looked at him when he passed, whispering among themselves, giggling behind their palms. He was hard-working, a hunter by trade, strong, capable. And she had heard people say that he had just recently moved into the village. Zuri was not used to being ignored. She had grown up with men chasing after her, watching them lose themselves over her, but not him. Why was he different? Was he married? Was he uninterested in women? Or was he simply blind to her beauty? The questions buzzed in her head like restless bees refusing to quiet, until finally she decided, if Kwame would not come to her, she would go to him. And that decision was the beginning of something no one in the village would ever forget. Zuri was patient. She knew how to play this game. At first, she made no obvious moves. She only found reasons to be near him. She would cross paths with him at the stream, offering a smile, a greeting, a playful remark about the weight of his bucket. She would walk past his hut on her way to the market, pretending not to see him at first, then acting surprised when he called out to her. She made sure her presence lingered like a soft scent carried by the wind, subtle, yet impossible to ignore. And Kwame noticed, but he did not chase her. He welcomed her presence, but kept his distance. Whenever she got too close, if she made a playful comment about his muscles, he would chuckle but never respond. If she leaned in a little too much when they sat together, he would shift away, just slightly enough for her to notice, but not enough to seem rude. One afternoon, they were sitting on a fallen tree trunk, the sun warm on their backs. Birds chirped, lazily in the trees, and the air smelled of earth and ripened fruit. Zuri studied Kwame's face, watching the way the sunlight played on his features. His jaw was strong, his skin smooth, his lips curved into an easy smile. Then out of nowhere she asked, "Kwame, are you a virgin?" Kwame burst into laughter, a deep, rich laugh that shook his shoulders and made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Zuri just watched him, a smirk on her lips. When his laughter finally died down, she tilted her head and continued, "I doubt you are. You can't be this handsome and still be a virgin." Kwame chuckled again, shaking his head, but he never answered the question. Instead, he picked up a small stone and tossed it into the distance. "Why does that matter?" he asked, amusement still lacing his voice. Zuri shrugged. "I'm just curious." Kwame gave her a knowing look, but didn't press further. And, for the first time, Zuri felt a slight shift in the air between them. Days passed, and their meetings became more frequent. There was a baobab tree at the edge of the village where they often sat together. It had become their place, a quiet retreat, away from the eyes of the villagers. One evening, as the sky turned a deep shade of purple, they sat beneath the massive tree. The wind was cool, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and distant firewood smoke. Kwame leaned back against the tree, his arms folded over his chest. Zuri sat beside him, her legs stretched out in front of her, tracing patterns in the dirt with her fingers. For a while, there was only silence. Then Kwame spoke. "I don't want this to be about only one thing," he said, his voice steady. Zuri turned to look at him, one brow slightly raised. "I like you," he continued genuinely. "I don't want this to be something meaningless." Zuri's expression remained unreadable, but inside, her mind was racing. Finally, he was saying all the things she had heard before, the words men whispered to her, words that always came just before the moment she struck. She had been patient. She had played the game well, and now it was time. Kwame turned to her, his gaze soft, but filled with something deeper. "I want more than just stolen moments in the dark," he said. "I want something real." Zuri blinked. Was he serious? Most men only wanted one thing from her, but Kwame was different. In that moment, as he looked at her with such raw honesty, she almost hesitated. But then he moved closer. His scent filled the air between them, earthy, warm, mixed with the faint traces of sweat and firewood. Zuri didn't move away. His breath was warm against her skin, and his fingers brushed against hers. Slow, deliberate. The air between them grew thick with something unspoken. Then Kwame whispered, "Let's go to my hut." Zuri's heart skipped a beat. His hut? She had never followed any man to his hut before. She couldn't. She had always met them in the bush, in hidden places where no one could see, where no one could suspect. If she went to his hut and something happened to him by morning, people would start to talk. But if she refused, would she lose this chance forever? She needed to think fast. Zuri smiled, placing a gentle hand on Kwame's chest. "Why walk all the way to your hut," she whispered, "when we can just stay here or find somewhere close?" Kwame frowned slightly. "You mean in the bush?" he asked. Zuri nodded, tilting her head playfully. "It'll be more exciting." Kwame's expression shifted. He took her hand in his, lacing his fingers through hers, then gently shook his head. "I value you too much to do that," he said firmly. "If this is going to happen, it will. Happen the right way, not in the bush." Zuri's fingers tightened slightly around his. For the first time, she felt trapped. She had two choices. One, go with him to his hut and risk being seen. Two, refuse and possibly lose the moment forever. A part of her wanted to pull away, to end this now. But the other part, the part too deep in the game, couldn't walk away, and so she made her choice. She smiled at Kwame, hiding her hesitation. "Okay," she said softly, but inside, she was already planning how to make her next move. Zuri followed Kwame, but she was careful, very careful. She knew how to slip through shadows unseen, moving like a whisper in the night. The village was quiet, the flickering torches outside the huts casting long shadows. But Zuri knew the dangers of being spotted. If anyone saw her entering a man's hut at this hour, questions would be asked. She waited. She listened. When she was sure no one was watching, she slipped inside. The moment the door shut behind them, they rushed toward each other. Their hands were everywhere. Breathless gasps filled the air. It was as if they had waited too long for this moment, as if the fire between them had finally consumed them both. Kwam's hands roamed her body, pulling her closer, tighter. Zuri knew this part well. She had done this before, many times. She let him take control for a while, let him feel like he was leading. But soon she took over, because this was where she thrived. This was where she held all the power. Kwame lay back, his eyes dark with hunger as she climbed on top of him. She knew exactly how to move, how to make every man surrender completely. And just like all the others, Kwame succumbed. His breathing slowed, his eyelids fluttered, and then he passed out. Zuri smirked. It was done. She had him exactly where she wanted him, and now the curse would complete its work. She felt it, the slithering sensation along her spine, the familiar cold slide against her skin as the snake emerged. It always happened this way. It was no longer a shock to her. She didn't need to look down to know what was coming. She could feel it. The snake, her inheritance, her curse, glided across the bed, moving toward Kwame, ready to take what it always took. But just as it was about to strike, Kwame's eyes flew open. His hand shot out, pushing her off him. Zuri gasped, rolling to the side, completely stunned. How? No man had ever woken up before she was done. No man had ever resisted her. But what happened next froze the blood in her veins. Kwame sat up and began to speak. But the words, they were not Igbo. They were not from any language Zuri had ever heard before. They were ancient, deep, and powerful. And as the words poured from his lips, the snake changed direction. Zuri's heart pounded. She watched in horror as the snake turned toward her. It had never done this before. She tried to speak, to command it to stop, but the snake did not stop. It did not turn back. Instead, it slid toward her, coiling around her legs, then her waist, tighter and tighter. Zuri screamed, thrashing, trying to fight it, but the snake, her snake, was no longer hers to control. It wrapped itself higher around her ribs, her arms, trapping her in its suffocating grip. Her breath came in ragged gasps. She turned to Kwame, desperation in her eyes. "Please," she begged. "Kwame, stop this. I'll do anything. Just stop it." But Kwame, no, he was no longer Kwame. Before her very eyes, he began to change. His youthful face withered. His smooth skin wrinkled. His strong, muscular body shrank. His shoulders curved, his hands aging before her eyes. Zuri's lips trembled. She could not breathe. She had only seen transformations like this in stories, in legends, in nightmares. Kwame was no young man. He was an old man in disguise. The moment he finished his transformation, he looked at her, and when he spoke, his voice was deep, ancient, filled with quiet rage. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Zuri couldn't answer. She could barely breathe, but he didn't need her response. He stepped closer, staring at her with eyes that had seen far too much. "My name is Ogidi," he said, "and you killed my son." Zuri's mind reeled. "His son?" She struggled to speak. I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you do," he interrupted, his voice calm, too calm. "I believe you remember Obiora." His voice was steady, but his eyes burned into her. Zuri's chest tightened. He had traveled far, he continued. He needed to know what happened to his boy. He needed answers. Azubuike explained how he had gone to a very strong priest, and the priest had told him everything. How Zuri had inherited her grandmother's curse, how it had made her family wealthy and powerful, and how, in return, she had to keep feeding the curse. Ogidi's eyes burned into her. "The priest told me what I had to do," he said, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. I had to make you fall for me. Zuri's body turned cold. She was the one who had been hunted all along. The snake squeezed tighter. She gasped, struggling, but there was no escape. Azubuike took one slow step forward, and then, in a voice laced with ancient power, he spoke the final words, words Zuri did not understand, words that sealed her fate. And in that moment, everything went dark. The next day, Zuri fell very ill. She decided to confess her actions to the entire village. With tears streaming down her face, she told them everything about the curse, how she had inherited it from her grandmother, how it had given her family wealth and power, but at a terrible cost. She told them that the land needed a cleansing, or else the curse would pass to another family. Those were her last words before she passed away. The next morning, a ritual was performed, and the land was cleansed. From that day forward, peace returned to the village. As the years passed, the villagers told and retold the tale. Fathers warned their sons to be careful of beauty without virtue. Mothers warned their daughters never to seek power at the cost of their souls. And to this day, when the wind whispers through the baobab tree at night, the villagers say it carries Zuri's voice, a warning, a reminder that evil, no matter how well hidden, will always be repaid in full. This story teaches us that power, gained through wickedness, will always come at a price. No secret stays hidden forever. The truth always finds a way out. Justice may be slow, but it is always certain. Those who harm others for their own gain will eventually face the consequences of their actions.